20 years of late nights, endless reports, and crises survived had finally led to this day. When I opened my inbox that morning, my heart skipped. HR had sent an email by mistake, a scanned copy of the board's signed approval for my promotion to Director of Strategy. For once, fortune seemed to lean in my direction. I printed the document, tucked it carefully into my leather folder, and told myself this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The team briefing room buzzed with chatter. About 50 colleagues filled the space, the air electric with anticipation. When my manager cleared his throat and announced my promotion, the room erupted in applause. Palms slapped together. Some voices even cheered. A wave of warmth surged through me. Finally, after 2 decades of proving myself again and again, I had arrived, but the doors opened with a sharp slam of heels on tile. Renata Villalba glided in, her designer suit radiating money and privilege. At 27, she hadn't managed a single major account, but she walked as though the company belonged to her. She lifted her chin and cut through the applause with words that sliced clean. Correction, this role requires more tenure. Angela will not be promoted. The room gasped. My smile froze as my certificate shook slightly in my hand. Renata's voice dripped with practiced sweetness as she added, effective immediately. She will transition to a coordinator support position. My ears rang. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some people looked away. Others avoided my eyes altogether. No one challenged her. I stood still, humiliation burning my throat, the signed approval pressing against my side from inside my folder. How could they erase me so brazenly? When the board itself had already sealed the decision, Renata smirked, then mentioned refreshments waiting in the lounge, as though she hadn't just gutted 20 years of loyalty in public. I forced my legs to move, stepping out of the room with dignity I didn't feel. As the door closed behind me, I knew this wasn't just favoritism, it was theft in broad daylight, and the proof of their betrayal was still in my bag, waiting for the right moment to surface. I didn't even sit down after leaving the briefing room. My heels clicked hard against the tile as I headed straight for HR. The receptionist lifted her head, lips already tightening into a rehearsed smile. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her hand inching toward the phone. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I was just stripped of a promotion in front of 50 people. That qualifies as urgent. Before she could protest, I pushed past her and opened the door to Tomas Ibanez's office. He looked up from behind his desk, the kind of man who had perfected the art of corporate neutrality expression, blank, tie straight, hands folded. I laid the printed email on his desk. "Explain this." For a long moment, he stared at the paper as though it were radioactive. "Finally," he exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "Angela, Renata is the CEO's daughter. That's how things work here. No corporate doublespeak, just the raw truth, delivered like a punch to the ribs." My jaw locked. 20 years of late nights, reorganizations, and international travel, all erased because I didn't share a last name with Hector Villalba. And the project I pressed. Tomas shifted uncomfortably. "Renata has assumed responsibility for the European expansion." I gathered the email and walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. My pulse hammered as I crossed the open office floor. When I reached my desk, I stopped short. Renata was already there, sitting in my chair, logged into my account, typing like she owned it. She looked up only long enough to demand, "Where are the final project files in the shared drive?" I said evenly. She stood, smoothing her blazer. "Perfect. I'll take it from here." I watched her strut toward the glass conference room, clutching the outdated files like trophies. What she didn't know was that the real documents, the ones that actually mattered, were tucked safely in my folder. And for the first time that day, a cold clarity settled over me. By the time I pulled into our driveway in Brookfield, my stomach was a knot. The porch light glowed warmly against the evening shadows, but it felt like I was walking into a storm. Ramiro was at the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled up, chopping onions for dinner. He didn't even look up before asking, "How'd it go?" His tone carried expectation, hope. I set my bag down carefully, avoiding his eyes. "It was taken from me," I said. He paused. "Knife in mid-air." "What do you mean, taken?" "The CEO's daughter decided she wanted the promotion. They handed it to her." His mouth tightened, and he shook his head slowly. "After 20 years, Mariana came in then, her backpack slipping off one shoulder. She waved a thick envelope. 'Mom, another acceptance letter.' She caught my expression and stopped. What happened, I forced a smile. 'We'll talk later.' She opened the envelope anyway, her eyes lighting for a moment before dimming when she saw mine. 'This one's from Northridge University. Tuition's $45,000 a year. You said the promotion would cover it.' The words sliced deep. Ramiro stepped closer. 'We'll figure it out. You'll find a way.' You always do. But I felt the weight pressing down on my chest. My career betrayal wasn't just humiliation, it was threatening our future, our daughter's dreams. After dinner, I went upstairs to change. When I came back down, Mariana was at the table, my briefcase open in front of her. In her hands was the congratulatory letter from the board, their signed approval of my promotion. Her eyes brimmed with anger. "They chose you! How can they just erase that?" I took the paper gently, pulled her into my arms. Fury burned beneath my skin. Hotter than before. Someone had overridden the board. Someone powerful enough to rewrite decisions in daylight. I didn't know how yet, but the forgery was there, hidden in plain sight, and I intended to uncover it. The office was nearly deserted by the time I returned that night. Only the hum of the HVAC and the faint glow of computer monitors broke the silence. From the corner of the floor, I saw her Renata in the glass conference room, rehearsing like she was preparing for a pageant instead of a board presentation. She clicked through slides with sweeping hand gestures, pausing to practice her smile in the reflection of the glass. When she opened her mouth, the words were hollow. Digital transformation, cross-platform scalability, synergistic optimization. She tossed the phrases out like confetti, colorful but meaningless. Her tone carried confidence, but her eyes darted nervously each time she stumbled over an acronym she clearly didn't understand. Then she arrived at the one slide that mattered more than all the others, slide 22. She tapped it with her manicured nail, voice steady. "Our timeline anticipates the EU regulatory vote in Q1 next year." I felt a chill. The real vote was scheduled for the following Tuesday, just days away. She didn't know it, hadn't even checked. That single line would unravel everything she thought she was about to achieve. Renata repeated the section twice more, each time smiling wider, as though confidence could disguise ignorance. I leaned against the wall in the shadows, silent, watching. When she finally noticed me, she straightened her blazer. "Angela, quick question." Any updates on the vote schedule? I let the pause hang, then answered evenly. "No changes. Still Q1 next year." Her relief was immediate, her smile bright, perfect. That's what I thought. She gathered her papers, humming as she packed up, satisfied with herself. I stayed behind, looking at the glow of her slides on the empty screen. She thought she was untouchable, but she was walking blind toward disaster. And for the first time since the ceremony, I felt something sharper than humiliation, a calm, deliberate patience settling over me. I was at my desk early the next morning, sorting through files, when my phone buzzed with an international number. The name that appeared made my chest tighten. Lars Nystrom, my most reliable contact in Brussels. His message was short, blunt, and chilling. "Vote is Tuesday. Miss it. And Arden loses millions." I stared at the words, the weight of them pressing into me. If the filing wasn't made in time, the entire European expansion would collapse before it began. Renata's presentation was built on a lie, and she didn't even know it. For a brief moment, I considered marching into Beatrice Quintana's office, laying everything on the table, but something tugged at me. There was more here than an arrogant heiress fumbling through my slides. I dug deeper into the project archives, scanning through contract logs. That's when I saw them documents Renata had signed weeks earlier with a second-rate distributor in Prague, bypassing compliance checks. The terms were reckless high penalties, no protections, vague commitments. It looked like desperation disguised as initiative. My pulse quickened. She hadn't stolen my project just to wear the credit. She needed it. My research, my timelines, my credibility, they were the camouflage for her mistake. The boardroom wasn't just her vanity stage, it was her cover-up. I began printing everything: emails, contracts, my time-stamped files, even the regulatory updates I'd forwarded weeks ago. The stack of paper grew heavy in my hands, heavier still in meaning. This was no longer about me being humiliated in front of colleagues. It wasn't even about the promotion anymore. Renata had put the entire company at risk, and if I didn't act carefully, she might drag my 20 years of work down with her. I slid the papers into my folder and locked it. For the first time in days, the fire inside me shifted from anger to clarity. I wasn't simply defending what I'd earned. I was protecting the company's survival and my family's future along with it. The next time those boardroom lights came on, everything would hinge on what Renata didn't know. The boardroom felt more like a stage than a meeting space. The long, polished table gleamed under harsh lights, lined with directors and investors, their faces expectant. At the head sat Beatrice Quintana, her presence commanding even before she spoke. I slipped quietly into the back row, notebook in hand, content to be invisible. Renata made her entrance 5 minutes late, heels echoing across the marble floor. She carried herself like the heroine of some glossy magazine, spread lipstick perfect, blazer sharp, smile rehearsed. To the untrained eye, she looked unstoppable. The presentation began, and for 15 minutes she coasted. Slide after slide reflected months of my research, market analyses, risk projections, competitor breakdowns, all delivered in her voice, as though she had built them line by line. The room rewarded her with nods and polite half-smiles. To them, nothing seemed amiss. Then came slide 22. Renata tapped the clicker, her voice ringing with false assurance. Our timeline anticipates the EU regulatory vote in Q1 next year, which allows us ample time to curious. Lars Nystrom interrupted, leaning forward, his accent cutting through the air. Because, according to the Commission, that vote is scheduled for this Tuesday. The silence that followed was deafening. Renata blinked, momentarily frozen, then forced a smile. I believe there must be some miscommunication. Beatrice's frown deepened. Whispers rippled through the room. One investor pulled up an official notice on his tablet and slid it across the table. Dates and stamps glared in black and white. Renata's composure cracked. She flipped pages frantically, searching for a lifeline that didn't exist. Her buzzwords faltered. Her practiced gestures lost rhythm. The confidence that had carried her into the room drained away, leaving only panic. From my seat in the shadows, I stayed perfectly still. Calm eyes, steady breath. The truth had finally begun to surface, not because I forced it, but because it was undeniable. When Renata stumbled into the next section, her voice trembling, I knew the unraveling had only just begun. The meeting ended in fragments, directors murmuring, investors shuffling papers, Renata vanishing like smoke. I stayed where I was until a voice called my name. Angela Serrano, Conference Room B. When I entered, the air was heavy with silence. Around the table sat Beatrice Quintana, eyes sharp as glass, Lars Nystrom with his team, and the full board. At the far end slumped Hector Villalba, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. Renata was nowhere in sight. Beatrice spoke first. Were you aware of the actual EU vote timeline? Yes, I said. My voice was steady, but my pulse hammered. I warned my superiors weeks ago, but I was removed from the project before I could update the documents. The words landed like a stone dropped into water. Gasps. A shifting of chairs. Hector's gaze dropped to the table, his silence more condemning than any excuse. I set the manila folder in front of me and opened it slowly. This is the complete analysis updated, time-stamped, every regulatory adjustment included. You'll see the accelerated timeline, the compliance strategies, and the financial impact projections. Beatrice gestured for me to continue. One by one, they questioned me logistics, tax implications, Brexit adjustments. I answered each calmly, without hesitation. The documents spoke louder than I ever could. Investors leaned forward, nodding, impressed not by theatrics, but by precision. At one point, Hector tried to interject, but Beatrice silenced him with a look that froze the air. She turned back to me. From this moment, Angela Serrano leads this project. Full authority, immediate execution. For the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs expand fully. Years of patience and discipline had funneled into this moment. I gathered my papers, aware that the company's survival now rested on my shoulders. As I left the room, the chatter resumed behind me. The deadline loomed like a storm on the horizon, but for the first time since my humiliation, I wasn't walking into it defenseless. The next 2 days blurred into a relentless sprint. I pulled in the colleagues who had stood by me through late nights and impossible deadlines, people who knew the work mattered more than politics. We spread across the conference tables, laptops glowing, coffee cups piling up. For 48 hours, we combed through compliance checklists, restructured filings, and polished every word until the documents were airtight. When the final packet left our server, time-stamped and confirmed by the commission, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Hours later, the reply came back. Arden's filing was accepted. We were in. Millions in potential losses avoided. The company was safe. News spread faster than I expected. By mid-morning, whispers coursed through every floor. Investors issued carefully worded statements praising Arden's swift professional correction, though everyone knew exactly who had provided it. The same names came up in every conversation, mine, and Renata's, though for very different reasons. Renata vanished from the building, her office dark and untouched. Hector cited a family emergency and cleared his calendar, though no one seemed convinced. Silence clung to their absence, louder than any denial could have been. At home that night, the tension finally broke. I set my bag down and called Mariana into the kitchen. She appeared with that guarded look teenagers wear when they're afraid of bad news. I smiled and said, "Apply to your dream school. We can afford it." Her eyes widened, then welled. Ramiro pulled me close, relief softening his shoulders for the first time in weeks. For once, the air in our house felt light again, but even as I soaked in their joy, I knew the story wasn't finished. Arden might have been saved, but the reckoning for Hector and Renata was only beginning. When the board reconvened the following week, the mood was unmistakably different. No one greeted Hector with the usual deference. He sat at the far end of the table, face drawn, while Beatriz Quintana called the meeting to order. Her voice was calm but unyielding, effective immediately. She announced, "Hector Villalba has tendered his resignation. The board has accepted." No applause followed, only a low current of whispers. Everyone knew the truth. His attempt to shield his daughter had destroyed his credibility more thoroughly than any outside scandal ever could. Renata's absence was noted but not explained. By the afternoon, headlines began to circulate. Nepotism on trial. Arden Global's cautionary tale and case study in failure. How inexperience nearly cost millions. Her glossy reputation, built on appearances and connections, collapsed in real time. I remained silent, hands folded neatly on the table, until Beatrice turned toward me. In recognition of extraordinary service, she said, "The board has unanimously voted to appoint Angela Serrano as Vice President of International Strategy. This role will report directly to the board and includes equity participation." The words sank into me slowly, almost too heavy to carry. It wasn't just a title. It was vindication. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice I had made for this company and for my family finally stood acknowledged. After the session ended, my phone buzzed. A text from Renata lit the screen. "Congratulations. I underestimated you. Won't happen again." I read it twice before pressing delete. Some messages didn't deserve a response. Walking out of the building, the cold air bit my cheeks, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. The battles of the past weeks were finally behind me. What lay ahead was no longer about survival. It was about how I would choose to lead now that I had the power I had earned. Months passed, and Arden Global looked nothing like the company I had nearly watched crumble. Under my leadership, the European expansion became more than a recovery. It became a triumph. Revenue tripled within 2 quarters. Compliance ratings shifted from questionable to industry standard. And regulators who once eyed us skeptically now treated us as a model of efficiency. Offers poured in from competitors' hefty salaries, signing bonuses, promises of corner offices, but I turned them all down. Leaving would have meant surrendering what I had fought so hard to build. Arden wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was proof that my 20 years of persistence had not been in vain. On a gray Thursday afternoon, as I was reviewing quarterly numbers, my assistant knocked. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "No appointment, but she insists it's important." The door opened and a young woman stepped in, barely older than my daughter. She introduced herself as Jennifer Morales, freshly graduated, nerves visible in the way she held her notebook. "Ms. Serrano," she said, "I know you probably don't have openings, but I wanted to ask if you might consider mentoring me. I don't want shortcuts. I want to learn the real way." Her honesty stopped me. In her wide eyes, I saw my younger self, the woman who had entered Arden 2 decades earlier, armed with nothing but grit and determination. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down," I said softly. "Let's begin." As she opened her notebook, I felt something shift inside me. The chaos of the past year, the humiliation, the betrayal, all of it had led me here, to this moment where I wasn't just protecting my own legacy, but shaping the next generation. In the quiet that followed, I reflected revenge isn't always sabotage or confrontation. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's letting arrogance collapse under its own weight while competence endures. Merit doesn't always win immediately, but it usually wins eventually. I smiled at Jennifer, ready to share everything I had learned. The sweetest victory wasn't proving Renata wrong. It was proving that true skill can never be erased.